It's time to clear off those shelves of good intentions filled with every curriculum, workbook, game, and project you thought would change your homeschool forever, and let go of the bins and boxes of worksheets and replace them with something a lot less overwhelming. But first, how about a quick introduction? I'm Megan. These are my kids, Raya and Max. They're currently in 8th and 3rd grades, and we've been homeschooling for 9 years. We made all the mistakes, tried all the things, cried all the tears, and finally I landed on something that simplified our homeschool using the thing we all love most, books. In this series, we're going to clear out that pile of good intentions and unused curriculum and replace it with something like this. It is so easy to take the stories and books that you already love and turn them into curriculum for your family that feels joyful and authentic to you. By simply opening up and flipping through the pages of your favorite books, you'll be able to create core curriculum to use all week. And with a treasury like Frog and Toad here that includes 20 stories, you could actually create a month's worth of curriculum with just one book and a handful of things that you can already find around your house. The first thing we're going to do is gather your supplies, and this could not be simpler. You simply need the book or books you're planning to use, a notebook and pens. I like to use Post-it notes to take notes and mark pages throughout the book without writing in the book itself, and a sweet little treat. Next, let's look at the process for creating curriculum this way. You'll make a list of the subjects you want to cover, read the book or a chapter or two if you're using a middle grade book, and as you read, you'll brainstorm ideas for subjects on the Post-it notes inside of the book. For example, in the story A Lost Button, maybe you'll write down buttons as math manipulatives. Then you'll take those ideas and plug them into your layout or plan for the week, and then make a list of supplies that you need, and I like to gather everything in a bin so that I know that the whole week is ready to go. So at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, but Megan, what actually makes this simpler than just opening up a workbook and doing the work for the day? To which I say, fair, but hear me out. There's the cost first and foremost. If you've got access to a library or you have shelves of books that you've forgotten about, you can use those to create your curriculum and then use a handful of items that you already have around your house and essentially create everything without having to spend a bunch of extra money. And then there's the fact that you get to cater this to your kids, to your homeschool, to your family. You can choose books that pique your kids' interests. You can choose based on the levels of that your kids are at, and you can cater it to a way that makes learning joyful and fun rather than just checking boxes and completing worksheets. To make it even easier though, I've taken a week's worth, I've laid out a week's worth of lesson plans using the Frog and Toad treasury that we looked at earlier. So I'm going to walk you through what each day of the week might look like using this method. All right, so let's start Monday off strong with cookies. We've got science and math and art even in baking cookies. Baking is fantastic for teaching so many different things. Your older kids can write out the recipe, everyone can gather ingredients, measure, and mix. You can then use your cookies as manipulatives to add, subtract, multiply, divide. If you make different types of cookies, you can also sort and categorize them. Your older kids can also gather data on everyone's favorite cookie and create a bar graph or an entire presentation if they choose. For history, you can discuss the origin of the cookie. Did you know that they came from 17th century AD Persia? Or learn about famous cookie bakers. YouTube videos are priceless for this kind of thing. Then for writing, have your kids create their own silly cookie recipe. Something absolutely absurd using ingredients that add up to who knows what. Think George's Marvelous Medicine by Roald Dahl. The most absurd ingredients you can possibly think of. Write them out for a writing project. On Tuesday, we've got the letter. Letters and envelopes can be used as manipulatives for math, and older kids could use your Maps app to measure distances to where their letters are going. For our writing project, we're going to write letters and send them to family and friends, so let your older kids pull up their addresses and sort of use that as math to measure distances, or, if grandma's house is closer than their friend's house and what the difference is between those distances. For history, you can discuss the history of the U.S. Postal Service. I'm including a link to a fun, quick video in the description. And then for science, read a book or watch a video about snails, since it is a snail who ultimately delivers Toad's letter, very slowly, of course. This is also a great pretend play option. You can have your kids set up their own post office and deliver mail throughout your house. This is another one where you can get really, really creative with how you approach this particular story. On Wednesday, we dive into A Lost Button, which basically writes itself as far as curriculum goes. Buttons are the perfect math manipulative to count, sort, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and older kids can organize buttons into charts and graphs. For history and science, look into and discuss who invented buttons and where and when, or how buttons are made. Again, library books and YouTube videos are perfect for this. We don't need complex worksheets or workbooks, but just discussions that allow your kids to take what they've learned and run with it are the best way for them and the least overwhelming way for you. For art, go ahead and use your buttons to make a collage or some jewelry the way that Toad made Frog a jacket. And for an extra fun field trip, you can visit a local thrift store and search for buttons as well as boxes, jars, or pretty teacups to store them in. This is one of those where you could play with buttons all week long and it doesn't need to be limited to just one day. Thursday's story is spring, and this is a great opportunity to introduce your younger kids to using a calendar, reviewing months, days of the week, how many days are in a year. You could count how many days, weeks, or months until spring, or until their favorite season or the next season if you happen to be in spring. For science, talk about hibernation, what animals hibernate and for how long. You could go on a nature walk and talk about what happens in spring. If you're in the middle of winter, like we are, you can notice what things look like now and what they might look like in the spring. For art, this is the perfect opportunity to turn them loose. Create a spring collage. Set out a plethora of things on a table, give them some paper and glue, and let them run wild. It might get a little messy, but it's always worth it. Think outside the box. You can use your buttons, you can use cereal, magazines, all kinds of colored paper, ribbon. Let them create with wild abandon. And then for writing, how about a spring bucket list? Speaking of lists, that's exactly what we'll be focusing on for Friday with the story, The List. I personally like to keep Fridays light as we wind down into the weekend, and that's what I've done here. So for math, this is a great story for sequencing. Take some note cards or pieces of paper, whatever you got, and write down the events from the story and have your kids put them in order. A great life lesson is talking about the different types of lists that we use and why they're useful. Think about shopping lists, to-do lists, wish lists, book lists, or yesterday's bucket list. And then just for fun, have your kids hide objects for one another and then create a list of clues. Make silly, absurd lists about whatever makes your kids giggle. Write a to-do list like Toad did and imagine if you could only do what was on that list. Think about things like bathroom breaks or drinking water. This is an opportunity to just be silly, practice handwriting, some creative writing. This is the kind of thing that maybe later you could take and turn into a story. Fridays are also perfect for field trips and reading in blanket forts. In addition to absolutely everything else we just covered, Frog and Toad could be used for these overarching topics as well. You could study frogs and toads and the differences between the two. You could do a whole unit on ponds. You could use it to talk about friendship or the seasons or gardens or storytelling. With a treasury like this one with 20 stories, there are so many things that you can do, so many activities from just one book. That's what makes this a great fit for everyone. And that's truly it. That's the big secret for how to take your homeschool from overwhelming to peaceful and from boring to life-giving. It's how you reclaim the homeschool you wanted. And it's how you go from this to this. Reading, connecting, and learning authentically and joyfully. Whether you know this is exactly what you've been looking for or you're not entirely convinced yet, I hope you'll give it a try and join me back here again next week while we do it all over again with another book.